And now to know more about the strategic impact of President Prabowo's visit to Russia, we are connected with international relations expert from Indonesia Defense University, Mr. Kusnanto Anggoro.
Pak Kusnanto Anggoro, thank you very much for your time for joining us for elaborating more about the official state visit of President Prabowo to Russia. So our first question, what is the significance, the strategic significance of President Prabowo's visit to Russia at President Putin's invitation, especially in the context of Indonesia's non-aligned foreign policy?
Well, I think it's very significant. It's part of the recalibrations of the Indonesia non-aligned policy. As you know, that non-aligned policy or independency and active and so on at the doctrinal and very doctrinal level. It was basically a principle that we cannot avoid it. At this strategic level, however, we would possibly opt for something else. And if you remembering the history during the last 20 years or so, you must remember that President Sutisno Bambang Yudhoyono actually devised at the strategic level what so-called as a role for Indonesia in mediating a global situation, including conflict and peace resolution and so on and so forth. President Joko Widodo during the last 10 years before President Prabowo, of course, have something very different, is more or less focusing on the economic transactionalism, where Indonesian role in global politics is actually somewhat recede at the different level again. So I guess the President Prabowo would like to reinventing the wheel what we used to have in the past, especially during 1950s and early 1960s, where Indonesia is actually power in global politics, including that one on the regional politics. So it is good step. No one can avoid that one. And of course, President Prabowo has done a lot. I would like to set up a new footprint on a new battlefield of the global politics and regional politics, especially and including, of course, in that context, the bilateral relationship between Indonesia and Russia. So it is recalibrating at the strategic and operational level from what it used to be in the past of a mediating role under Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, economic transactionalism under Jokowi. And this is by President Prabowo Subianto would like to introduce a new one, like dynamic equilibrium or dynamic balancing at the very strategic level. So I don't see this one as a contraposition to our ideological or principle of foreign policy of non-aligned one, because as I understand it, principle can be exercised in many ways, including from the left to the right or from up to bottom in more differentiated way. And President Prabowo Subianto has opted to balancing equilibrium.
And also in this kind of situation, Pak Kusnanto, we see that this particular visit is quite important since also President Prabowo will attend the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, or SPF, with the set of delegations following the president. What sectors, in your opinion, such as defense, energy, agriculture, or others, that you expect to dominate the bilateral agenda?
That would be on bilateral agenda, of course. I don't think that issue will be discussed that much on the St. Petersburg meeting, on the plenary sessions where President Prabowo would like to provide a remark and so on. But the significance is this. St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is a forum. It is a huge one. It's participating more than 20,000 delegations in this 2025-17 one. And much like Shangri-La Dialogue, for example, in Singapore, or Valdai Organization of Cooperation in Moscow. It is very important to set up the agenda. It is initial setup, initial stages of setting providing common concern, which are, of course, very important within the context of a trust or confidence building. It may not have a significant at the implementation level, but at least in so doing, by joining the one, you can, of course, express what actually you wanted to about the global politics, about the state of multilateralism under the erosions by President Trump American policy, first policy, and by the dilemma that now West European countries actually also facing, and many issues and conflict in Palestinian with Israel, Iran, with Israel, and Russia and Ukraine, and about emerging issues like a global supply chain, global climate change, and so on and so forth. The primary objective of this St. Petersburg meeting, of course, is just a forum to know one to the others, is to agenda setting, to the issues of trust and confidence building, rather than to resolve any problem of that. It is an initial step. It is necessary, but it might not be sufficient. It is within this context that the sufficiency would probably be discussed much further in the bilateral relationship between Indonesia and Russia. And as you know, and also acknowledged by Foreign Minister himself, that a lot of preparation, and I know that some high-level meetings already taking place in April this year, and so on and so forth.
All right, Pak Kusnanto, our next question is, Indonesia has consistently emphasized its commitment to a non-block foreign policy, even while engaging right now with both BRICS and the OECD. So how do you see this visit to Russia in that broader geopolitical balancing act?
Well, I don't see that BRIC and OECD is an either or choices. I don't see this one as an alternative one to the others. So many people actually see the perspective from the hedging perspective, that by joining A and by joining B, Indonesia is actually doing a hedging. But you must remember, but the principle of hedging strategy is basically to minimize risk. What we are doing by approaching both BRIC and OECD is not hedging issue. It is basically much more as the optimizations of benefit. We must understand actually that both entity, I cannot mention organization because BRIC is not even an organization. BRIC is a forum, unlike OECD, is basically complementary one to the other. Two particular countries. For Indonesia, for example, of course, Indonesia would benefit much from BRIC, especially within the context of market access and investment. But if you are talking about global governance, about how to for example, to navigating between A, B, and C conditionalities and so on and so forth, the position of, say, South nationalism, then OECD would likely to become more restrictive. So again, I don't see that the joining of Indonesia in BRIC, while at the same time we are still expecting to become a full member of OECD in 2027, is one are opposed to the other. They are, according to me at least, is complementary one to the other. You must remember, for example, that Turkey, for example, is the member of the OECD, but still Turkey is applying for the membership of BRIC. You must remember that Brazil has already become a member of BRIC since the very beginning of 2007 and so on. But Brazil, of course, is still applying for OECD member. Now Brazil is a key partner, if I remember correctly. Of course, if you are looking at some other issues, there are some differences. OECD is much more political. It is interesting to see that Brazil, for example, despite Brazil being partners in 2007, but still failed to get a full membership. At the same time, Colombia, for example, only 2018 and so on, in 2020 has already become a full member of OECD. So was the case for another country, including Costa Rica, that by definition, country like Colombia and Costa Rica, of course, is much a smaller economic entity comparison to Brazil. So yes, OECD is more political. Nevertheless, I don't, again, trying to convert this one into a non-aligned or free and active policy of Indonesia. Whatever it is, joining BRIC would be okay. But remember that BRIC is not an organization. There is no charter in BRIC. And every decision was taken by conventional basis and non-legally binding. OECD at this time much more restricted, but still recognized about the constitutional and legal framework of our national law. So I don't want to see this in either or perspective. The question, of course, is how to optimize Indonesian position within BRIC on the one hand, and within OECD in the next 2007 and beyond.
Although, on the other hand, Pak Kusnanto, the international community has seen quite strong bond being built between Indonesia and Russia since the administration of President Prabowo Subianto. As we all know, we had the first since a long time before the naval joint exercise. And then, although in the middle of concerns of Australia, while reported that Russia has requested permission for its aircraft to be based in Manuhua Air Force Base in Papua, although that was being tackled, the issue was being tackled and said no, there would be no base of Russia's aircraft in Papua. But is there any chance to, this visit could revive or strengthen strategic defense cooperation between Indonesia and Russia, especially given past discussions about around submarines and fighter aircraft?
First, I just would like to confirm that Russia is basically underrated partner from Indonesian perspective, I guess. You must remember that, in fact, between Indonesia and Russia has already had, and we ratified, if I remember correctly, law number 12. I can't remember the number, but it should be sometime in 2012, more than 13 years ago, about the technical military cooperation between Indonesia and Russia. And since then, in fact, the cooperation between the two countries in defense and military has not moved so significantly. Of course, we cannot blame the Russian and we cannot blame the Indonesian as well. It is partly of the issues and partly because of the Russian-Ukraine war since 2012, partly also because of the Katsa policy by the United States in 2017, and so on and so forth. But if we are looking at the map of the Indonesian defense cooperation, then almost all of the 10 largest partners of Indonesia is neither Russia nor China. So I think it's still underrated relationship between Indonesia and Russia on that sense. Well, of course, there are some discussion during the last couple of weeks or years about the, say, military bases, about satellite, and so on and so forth in Manahua and Biak. But I don't think that this is a very serious discussion, if any at all. When the discussion is taking place, it's nothing more than sending a signal to the West, for example, that Indonesia actually have still some more options. It's not only to following what the West actually, or the American actually wanted to, but that we have our option, including cooperating with Russia. In reality, for example, I don't think there will be a military basis in Manao. I don't think there will be a military satellite in Biak. The most likely possible it will be commercial satellite and so on and so forth, but in fact, they still according to international law. Of course, we can discuss other issues as well. That we may be closer to Russia, including the first naval exercises in November 2024, if I remember it correctly. But we are looking at the substance of the relation of the exercise. It's not a combat ready. It is not for the strengthening defense capability. It is entirely related in some issues with humanitarian, with prevention of conflict, with communication, and so on and so forth. Does not directly influence the offensive capability of Indonesia. This one is unlike the cooperation that we have with Western countries. So in defense and military cooperation, for example, of course, Russia is in desperate need to reopening its relationship in Southeast Asia, including in Indonesia. And of course, Russia used to be very dominant in our market here in 1960, 1970. But beginning in 1970s, it shrunk. It's limited only on some countries like Myanmar or like in Vietnam and so on. And everybody knows that Vietnam is actually much more willing to having a close relation with the West and the American particularly rather than with the East or Russia. And Indonesia have some similar interests, especially within the context of diversification of defense supply. But again, we must look at it more differentiated way. What we would like to actually to have from the Russian side, I don't think that there will be a serious discussion. Again, the word serious is very important. Discussion, of course, is too general. Again, I would repeat, there will be serious discussion on the purchases of like Sukhoi or even submarine and so on and so forth. But it would be likely for Indonesia to discuss possibility of cooperating with Russia on some issues, including on unmanned vehicle and robotic and emerging technologies,
So
basically.
it's
And
mostly
not
commercial,
actually
yeah,
having
Pak Kusnanto, yeah? It's mostly
shifting
commercial.
capability. Yeah,
Okay.
hopefully, yes, commercial. But you know that this one is that I don't think that at this time would be adequate to discuss about procurement,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
elaborating the possibility of cooperation in terms of one, exchange of information, two, strengthening academic and research capability, and three, trying to elaborate the possibility of production and so on and so forth, and four, what kind of farm production, if possible at all, would be exercised. What we do need at this point, or we have in the next couple of months, is something like strategic blueprint. We will, of course, assign more than five memorandum of understanding, including on defense cooperation. But that might not be sufficient. We have 100 MOUs, but it's quite a few actually in the MOU concretized into more operational plans. So what I want in this time, if you find something with Russia during the President Prabowos visit to Russia, is just during the very limited time, maybe 3 or 6 a month, be proceed with a strategic blueprint for the cooperation that we're likely to have in the next 10 years.
Of course, that's actually a very good hope, which we also hope the same way. And Mr. Kusnanto Anggoro, International Relations Expert from Indonesia Defense University, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a very insightful conversation with you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
And,